Okay, so Rachel, thank you for joining us. I'm assuming you want to share your screen to walk us through the program and services budget. So Rachel's here to share with the Finance Committee the program and services contract from the IU that is on our agenda later in this meeting and will be on our agenda at the Committee of the Whole meeting on the 24th. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And let me know, I'm going to share my screen. And I'll make sure that you can see the presentation. So just give me a moment and you can let me know if it's coming through okay. Are you seeing the presentation now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right.
One second. What is this box?
So Rachel, you just went into full screen, which is so great. We do see ourselves as well in you. I don't know if you're able to move your your Google Meet side panel off of. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Oh, no problem.
Just the way Tom likes it.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, well, thank you so much for letting me come to your meeting this evening. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm happy to do this as an alternative and certainly address any questions after this presentation as well. So please stop me at any point if you do have questions as we go, or I certainly can entertain questions at the end. For those who may not know me, my name is Rachel Holler. I'm an assistant executive director at the Bucks IU. And I have the privilege of facilitating and leading the programs and services division of the Bucks IU. And so what I'm going to be sharing with all of you is the 2026-2027 budget overview that will be up for your board approval. All right, so I'm going to advance to the next slide. There we go. So just as a opening slide, it's always nice to mention and to share that certainly we have a very long-standing partnership with the Centennial School District. We value that partnership, and I wanted to begin with that because it's always great to celebrate when we have a wonderful thing going. And so I wanted to share that we certainly value our partnership with the Centennial School District. To just give a brief overview, because sometimes people wonder, why are we approving this budget? This is a little bit different or confusing. So I'll give you just a little background slides. The first one that you see on the screen or that you're viewing is that what is an intermediate unit? And so you may or may not know that the Bucks IU is actually one of 29 intermediate units covering the state of Pennsylvania. And we really, our mission is to operate as a regional educational service agency, providing cost-effective, management-efficient programs to not only your school district, but to all the public and private K-12 schools, school districts, and community of Bucks County. And really one of the major charges that we follow as an intermediate unit is to support the implementation of federal, state, and local education policies, as well as creating new services as determined by local need. And just as a quick example of what new services might you be talking about, I've been at the Bucks IU for 10 years. And when I first got to the IU, just as one example, STEAM was kind of a new thing. STEAM or STEM kind of programs was not necessarily something it was just coming to be an acronym that was kind of starting to become popular. And since that time, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the things we've been doing in your district, but the idea of, what the mobile Fab Lab program that we have and the Fab Lab Center, all of those things have been created really because of the local needs that we saw and heard from districts throughout the county. And that's just one example of what that might look like when you see that slide about creating new services and how we try to stay in touch with everything that's going on in the county and the needs and being sure to fill those to the best of our ability. And so why the budget needs to be approved, just it might be a question you're wondering. And based on the Pennsylvania School Code, a majority of the school districts that comprise our intermediate unit will vote annually to approve this particular budget, and it's a subset of the overall IU budget. And the other services, as one major example that you might be familiar with, because we have as we support special education programming throughout the county. Those types of services are actually purchased separately, and they are not included in the budget that I'm going to be going over with all of you. So this is a screen that goes over just what's the programs and services budget as part of the actual Bucks IU comprehensive annual budget. And so we're going to be looking right now at 25-26 amounts because the 26-27 Bucks IU budget has not yet been finalized. So we're comparing like apples to apples in the sense of both of these budgets show the 25-26 amounts. But just to give you that point of comparison, the Bucks IU's budget is over $257 million, and the programs and services budget is $2.2 million thereabouts during this current year. So you can see that as a percentage of the overall IU budget, what you're approving for the programs and services budget, or what you approved this past year that we're functioning under right now, is about 0.8% of the IU budget. I would argue that we are a small but mighty group. We do a lot of great work throughout the county, but in terms of the scope of that work in relation to the Bucks IU budget, it kind of gives you a sense of what you're approving and how that stands in relation to the full Bucks IU budget. And so some fast facts by the numbers for these upcoming 26-27 budget that's under your consideration that I'll be talking about to all of you. The total budget for this upcoming school year is going to be $2,158,802. District contributions that go towards that budget is $1,076,000, approximately half of the overall budget. So the overall increase in the amount of the district contributions year over year from 25 to 26 school year to this upcoming 26-27 is $15,861. And of that $15,861, the centennial increase is $937. So that gives you a little bit of a perspective of where the budget is and what the increase for centennial is in relation to that. So the previous circle graph that we took a look at a couple slides ago, you saw that blue sliver was the programs and services budget in relation to the overall Bucks IU budget. So now we took that entire blue sliver, and that's what we're looking at now is a 26-27 budget. So if you think about the full circle really being the programs and services budget, I carved out via this visual the centennial contribution. And you can see there that the centennial contribution of that, roughly $2.15 million budget is $72,860, which is about 3.4% of the overall programs and services budget. So just a summary in pictures. You saw the overall Bucks IU budget. Now we're looking at the programs and services budget, and that's the sliver that would be essentially Centennial's contribution towards that $2.15 million. So what do you get for the amount of money that you contribute to the programs and services budget? I know that there's a full comprehensive budget package that we forwarded for all of you to review. That is, that's certainly not light reading. There's a lot of information there, but we always include it so that you have all the information that kind of summarizes each of the areas that you see on the screen here. I'm not going to go over every single one with all of you unless there's specific questions, but I'll highlight a few on this slide. And then I also will have a few others that I'll highlight on a subsequent slide so you can see a little bit more about what does it, what kinds of things is Centennial taking advantage of in particular this year. Just so that you can kind of see that I feel that we have, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we have a strong relationship with the district. And as a result, we always are working to be responsive to all the requests and things that come in from your district. So a couple highlights for you. One of them is that we facilitate a number of advisory councils, and your team members are active members of many of those advisory councils. Some advisory councils meet on a monthly basis, such as the high school consortium and the high school assistant principals. And I know I have the pleasure of seeing those team members on a monthly basis for those meetings. we have our Programs and Services Advisory Council, which Dr. Zatkin serves on, and that's something that we regularly have those meetings on a monthly basis as well that he's able to attend. And those types of meetings give an opportunity for districts to come together across the county to share information, to ask questions of each other, to learn information because we end up becoming a conduit for a lot of new initiatives and information coming from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So I think these are a really important service that we provide to our districts in terms of making sure we are responsive to what's happening and are also able to, the economy of scale of bringing everyone together and talking through things is very powerful. Another one that I'll highlight is that we offer a number of student programs. And so when we have student competitions and those kinds of opportunities, we know that Centennial students are often participating in those. And those are, we are always a pleasure to be able to provide and support those types of programs. So those are two highlights from that list of all the different things that we provide. But I'll give you a couple more specifics and then certainly we'll entertain any questions you might have as well. So some highlights for the current school year that we are, it's always great to kind of take stock of what's happening and what your district is doing and how we're supporting the district when it comes to things that come through the Programs and Services budget. We are always happy to have participation from your district in the Leadership Development Fellowship. I would say that your district has worked very hard to identify people to go through that program that are able to then expand their leadership capacity within your district and grow their leadership skills. So that's something that you do have several amazing participants again this current school year. The Mobile Fab Lab, you may have heard, just actually finished up last 2 weeks of residencies, or last week there were actually 2 sites visited within your district. So we've done all three of your elementary schools have received a full week residence from the Mobile Fab Lab. And I know that was a highlight most recently that we heard great things about, that students really enjoyed seeing the Mobile Fab Lab within their building. Supports with STEELS standards implementation. This is the first school year where STEELS standards are actually in full implementation and will be assessed during the PSSA and Biology Keystone window. So we have done not only work across the county, but some specific customized work for your district to support the STEELS standards implementation. One of my team members has also supported some social studies curriculum renewal. We have the pleasure of having some chief science officers from your district. This is the student leaders who are working on STEM projects for your district. And so we support that program and are happy to have your students participate in it. We've also been supporting the development of the comprehensive plan. And that seems like I always joke that it seems like it's almost every year you feel like you're doing it, but this is the year that you've been really rolling up your sleeves and working on completing that plan. And it comes again every 3 years that we'll be back and doing that work. And then finally, we have an instructional coaching initiative, and you have some participants in that initiative and who have taken advantage of that opportunity to come together with instructional coaches across the county. So those are some highlights for you when it comes to specific things that we've really had the pleasure of being more intensively involved within your district to date at this point. And this is just a summary. So we had one visit earlier in the fall for the Mobile Fab Lab, and at the conclusion of that visit, we give a little residency snapshot. So I thought that would be fun to share with all of you when we had Davis earlier in the school year in the week of October 20th, you can see a little highlight of what that looks like. And we just had the final 2 visits last week, and the schools just received a similar report of the summary of the work that could be shared with families. From a timeline perspective, you can see here that we are in the throes of the actual budget season. Back in December, we reviewed the budget and it was given preliminary endorsement by the Bucks County Superintendent. And then on January 20th, the next step in that process was to receive preliminary approval by our Bucks IU Board of School Directors. So right now, we're in the middle of budget approval times for our school districts, and we hope that you will vote to approve the budget by the end of February. And then it goes back to our Bucks IU Board of School Directors for final approval on April 21st at our April meeting. So that's the timeline when it comes to our budget. So I believe that's my last slide, and what I will do is stop sharing so I can address any questions you might have. And I, again, am happy to entertain anything that you might be curious about when it comes to the budget.
I do have one question. What is the methodology that is used in order to determine what goes to one school district versus another?
Oh, that's a great question. So what we do is every spring, typically we come out to the districts, and sometimes it's summer, it depends on districts and their availability. And we actually meet with districts to say, what is on the horizon for your district? What are the initiatives that we can support? And then from there, we don't say, I always tell them at the end of that meeting, this is not a speak now or forever kind of moment, meaning that if something comes up next week, next month, 3 weeks from, months from now, we will add that to the list. But that what happens is we do try to have those meetings to identify in partnership with the district team members what we can do to provide that support year over year. Any other questions?
Rachel, can you talk, and I think more to Mrs. Krieger, is that student counts are a part of the allocation, right? So there was a handful, right, a small couple of, I think on that like slide 37 to 38, right? The pie gets split in two different fashions, if you could comment on that.
Sure, absolutely. So there are two different ways that we work on the budget end of things, making the calculations. One of them is a fixed contribution, and that fixed contribution is something that has stayed steady for many, many years. The other one is a contribution per student enrollment. And so what we do is get the October counts from all the districts, and that's our opportunity to essentially account for the fact that based on size, some districts like a Central Bucks pay significantly more because they're looking at a much larger student count than a district like Centennial. So that's the other piece of the calculation that we do to make a determination on each district's allocation towards the overall budget.
Are there any other questions? All right, well, Rachel, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're busy down in Nashville, so I appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. I think that was very helpful.
You're very welcome. And if any other questions arise, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. What was that? I couldn't click the other one. All righty. So with that, let's start our agenda. Welcome, everyone. Mrs. Crossan, we're glad to have you here. We're glad to start at 4:45, and we'll get going. So if we could have a roll call. Mrs. Krieger, do you want to start that? Do you want to?
Aaron Krieger.
Patty Crossan.
Michael Hartline.
Okay, thank you very much. There's three and all in attendance. I will give a shout out to Vera, who is participating in that leadership development fellowship that Rachel spoke about, right? There's a handful of Centennial employees who are given that opportunity, and Vera's doing a great job participating in that. So that's real life, real time in the room. Certainly worth it.
So I also think it's important to note for the comprehensive plan, that is something that the IU charges other districts outside of Bucks County to do. So if somebody from Montgomery County or Berks County, whatever, wants to do a comprehensive plan through the IU's systematic process. It is something that they will charge for, that is included in our programs and services.
And I think, based on Tuesday's board meeting, right, you could see what went into that effort, right? That was a real doozy of a workload. And one of the things I don't think they shouted out, but, a couple of years, when I first got here, we had a comprehensive plan. I think it sat in a box, and I still remember Mr. Martin commenting on the comprehensive plan, saying, are you doing it, right? And I think that very next comprehensive plan that was rolled out, Dr. Bedden drilled it into us, right? We were doing it day in and day out. And I think the same is going to happen with this latest version of the comprehensive plan, right? I think it's really a good anchor for the district. Every one of us play a different part in it to connect us all together. So,
Do you do measurements at some point in terms of how successful you are?
we certainly measure ourselves against the academic standards that we do, right? We do that in assessments, and we do that in real achievement scores. Absolutely.
I mean, that's one of the things the board needs to hold together the superintendent to, as we do the annual superintendent reviews, those types of things. It's also important to note that the comprehensive plan procedure, the dates and the timelines on those are like hard fast with the state, and the IU keeps you on that schedule. It's just like, Mr. Greenwood does with the budgeting process. You start back from the primary date and you work your way backwards. The comprehensive plan has a set of dates that have to be met and that are hardcore. And they do an outstanding job in keeping you on that. I mean, it's only a process every 3 years, but you figure 13 districts in Bucks County, so they're doing 4 every year.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
The approval for the agenda for the February 12th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting. Are there any changes or corrections as allowed by law?
Second.
Approvals?
No, we just have to give a second and then we all.
All in favor?
All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
All in favor? Any dissents? Any dissent?
Or abstentions.
Or
Yep.
abstentions?
No, I think we're good.
Perfect. Please talk into the microphone, though, when it's not facing you, right? Thank you.
Let's go right to
I just want to make sure it's working.
Okay. Next is the approval of the minutes from the January 15th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting as per the attached.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any negatives or abstentions?
All right. Excellent.
Next is, there are no public comments to be made because there's nobody here from the public.
Okay.
Presentations, we just had the IU programs and services budget. So, Mr. Greenwood, it's now yours in terms of the 2025-26 year-to-date financial update.
All right. Here we go. So we will jump right in. I haven't had a meeting, Mrs. Crossan, with you in it. I tend to use the PowerPoint as a discussion guide as well. So just a look at our agenda. And we'll jump right into the financial update. We have collected $112 million so far through January 31st. This slide shows the total revenue, where we stand against our budget. So that first bucket, that first dial on the right, total revenue, we are 71.74% to our budgeted total. Historical trend would have us at 75%, so we're lagging a little bit in the total revenue. And I'll get it out in the public now. As we see in the bottom, our state revenue, right, and our basic ed funding has been delayed. We were expecting it. We got the first 2 payments when the governor signed on. We got them bang, bang real quick, and we've been waiting for this third one. I'll tell you, I was up last night, and I said, if I don't hear something, and I look every day, if I don't hear something, I'm calling. So searching the web, trying to find a phone number to call. I'm like, before I'm gonna call them, before I do, just let me check. And doggone it, it's on the list. So we will be getting that payment on the 26th of February. So it's queued up that we'll be getting just over $2.1 million in BEF funding, which will be the third installment. We'd expect 2 more of those. And when you got that, then it begins to level off the playing surface. So if you see the revenue by source at the bottom, we're at 14.8. It's 12.8. If we add $2.1 million, we're sort of back in the game there. And I think the rest goes as well across the schedule there. Local revenues, we're at 89% of our budgeted local revenues. That's sort of right on top of the local trend. And the state revenue is delayed really because of that, the BEF being late. It would be 38%, so still a little bit behind, but we are working through those, okay? And then it just lists the top revenue sources. Obviously, real estate taxes is the number one funding source walking away across the board, right? Local taxes in total represent the lion's share of school funding, public school funding in Pennsylvania, followed by 30-35% from the state and 1% or 2% from the federal government.
So how are we looking with the Act 511 earned income tax versus projected?
Mr. Harlan, it's like you read my slides.
I say, because I can, I gotta get better glasses. I gotta go to the 2s now, away from the 1.5s.
So this slide just shows the highlights. It shows the fiscal year-to-date amount for last year, where we are this year, and where we stand against the budget, and then the percentage against that budget. So the earned income taxes, we are year-to-date through July, we're at $2.7 million. Last year at this point, we were at $2.6 million. So I think we're trending very close to being right on budget, right? I don't think I'm not expecting today any anomalies. I reached out to Keystone, who does our tax collections. They provide not only an estimate that I use to incorporate in the budget for the next year, they also give you a snapshot of the second half of this year. And I think we're sort of trending in line with all of those expectations.
I got mine. Lucky you. Your accountant might think different.
One to call out, though, is interest in investments. And
that was my next question.
Like the boy crying wolf. But last year, interest revenue was $1.7 million. Now it's $1.5 million. I think we will begin to see interest revenue move down, right? I don't think it'll be like it was during the COVID window of 2020, when we had $70,000 in interest revenue. But I think it's, as a source of revenue, I think that is a dwindling source of revenue.
But it does look like we're going to meet our budgeted expectation.
I do. I think it'll be, it could be 2.2, it could be a little less, it could be a little more, but yes, I think we're certainly in range there, and that's what we're projecting it to be. Okay, and then you'll see the other boxed item is that basic ed funding, and I'm glad that they paid up, or I was going to drive to Harrisburg. And so that's the look at education, or at our revenue, and the summaries on the side. In terms of expenses, total expenses so far through January 31st, total $78,134,000. That's an increase of just over 1% compared to last year. Right, so I think we're working very hard to manage the costs that we're spending today, while we're sort of working on the budget for the future at the same time. So we're sort of pushing these numbers as well as we've done year after year, but making sure that we're responsible for that. and if you have any questions, certainly feel free to jump in. The overall expenses are 49.9%. Historical trend is 49.3. So again, I think we are on track. This shows salaries and benefits combined, and then the all other category of expenses, which I think we're a little bit ahead of, but the overall expenses are beginning to decline, as you see. The 15.7 in other expenses compared to the 13.9. This just calls out, similar to the other chart, our general fund expenses year-to-date through January 31st, just over 1% more than we were last year. Year-to-date salaries and benefits totaling $2.7 million. That variance, I think, is going to begin to get offset by purchase services, right? So I think some of the areas where we are paying more for our staff, such as transportation, right? I think we're going to rely less on the IU for transportation. So the salaries and benefits may be higher than anticipated, but we'll look at purchase services where the IU transportation lands in our statements. That should begin to decrease. We also continue, as we've started last year, looking at student outplacements, and we are trailing the budget relative to student outplacements as well by, roughly 30 kids today, right? That math is actually done on an ADM, an average daily membership, so it's not apples to apples, but I take a period in time, I reach out to the student services team, looking for numbers of students. So we have 111 kids out, 111 kids. I think we budgeted 130 kids, 133 kids out. So I think those are positive variances, similar to what we found last year. Right. And I think we were able to identify them quickly. The IU hasn't come back with their mid-year, but I expect that certainly before the end of the month.
Can we get a breakdown of salary to benefits? Most particularly, I'm looking for like healthcare. Because I know we're saying we're looking at, 14, 15, 17% increase. I'm just trying to get a wraparound of how much that's actually going to be.
Piece of healthcare that's in there. Yep,
yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you.
But some of that can't be changed because it was a giveaway when we did the contract, right?
Right. The contract spells out very specifically what the plan is. So it limits the amount of changes that can be done to it. To your point, Mrs. Crossan. So
we really took a hit on that.
Well, we actually went with a cheaper health insurance plan.
No, I meant what?
I think the plan and this prescription drug part of the plan, right? While we did create some movement, right? The prescription drug plan continues to be very expensive. Specialty drugs are over half of our prescription spend, and that is for less than 40 people, right? So 40 employees, and the use, and by no means belittle, when people are taking these drugs, because they're, many times life-saving and critical to them. But that's sort of the dynamic that we have working. We are, as I mentioned, at least one of the last couple of nights, been on the phone with Steve Fallon at the Health Trust, trying to push him to find better ways for us to manage that expense. So we continue to work through that. What's that?
I mean, nobody wants to pay more, but it's a commercial health insurance, so even if they pay more for a specialty medication, they can get a copay assistance to help them.
Right.
Not only would they not be paying, but the taxpayer wouldn't be paying. These things all should have been thought about.
Yep. Nope.
Before they signed that deal.
Totally agree. I totally agree. And we were working towards those for a period of time until we weren't. So, I think reaching out, and I raised that back up to the Health Trust as well, right? How can we get ahead of that in some way, shape, or form, right? So that was, we talked about that a year ago when I was there, and it seemed sort of one-sided that the employees would be getting all the discounts and the district would still pay the lion's share. I said, that doesn't sound right, but let's stay on the phone and let's work through that. So we'll continue to work to address that.
That's the importance of having you in a room when decisions are being made. Because you hold the wallet.
I appreciate that. This comparison just looks sort of collectively prior where we stood year-to-date against the fiscal year-to-date end-of-year actuals, and then where we stand on the budget side. So again, in total revenue, we're sort of trailing where we have been in the past. On the expense side, we're trailing a little bit on the 49% of the budget being used, almost 50%, compared to almost 52% this time last year against what ultimately was the actual number. So again, I think we are in good water right now. I don't like to say that too often because we still have a number of months to play, but that's where we stand. This last slide is sort of our projection. So as those who've been in the room, right, we continue to manage and update a real-time forecast that looks at with every year. We use history by month spending to educate that plan and be able to look at trends that we have as a district. And then we map those out to come up with a full year forecast, which is this column here. Right, so year-to-date actuals here, current year-to-date, additional expenses, the full year forecast, and our budget. Those are the columns that we look at. And when we get to a little further down the road on the budget cycle for next year, we'll begin comparing it to the forecast, which I think is a critical piece because the budget is just what it is. It's a point in time. I want to make sure that we're always relevant and comparing our next year budget, not to something that happened a year ago, but to what current expenses are in play. And that shows, $500,000 positive surplus at this moment forecasted. It's not in the bank, something to go south, but that's where we're standing, and revenue just over $100,000 to the positive side.
Is that taking into account the differential in purchase services that you were talking about with those students? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Beginning to, but not necessarily in its entirety,
Correct.
because we still have 4 months to go.
Correct.
Okay.
You got to keep some of the cards, right? So
Right.
we're looking at them, we're watching them, and as I said, monthly chatting with the student service team to understand on the outpatient side what the impact is, how we're comparing to the IU in all of those various areas. Okay.
In a prior meeting, you had made a comment about the lag in collecting for students coming from outside the district into our district where we should be recouping payments. Is there any plan in order to try and go back and collect those funds?
There is, and we're actively doing that. We're actively identifying them, we're actively invoicing them, and making those bills. It is a complex process because we need to identify the student, then we need to find their home school, right? They don't come necessarily with a label that says, "Hi, my name's Tom Greenwood and I'm from Upper Dublin," right? It really takes some effort, right? We need to send letters to the school. The letter doesn't, if they don't respond to the first one, we send a second letter, we send a third letter, and there's a lot of back and forth between that. And we're talking about students who, in some cases, are there for literally a couple of days, and there's some students that are there for the majority of the year. So it is a complex sort of timing process that we're working on. I thought we had completed the 24-25 year. I thought we had that locked down, and just the other day, because we meet monthly to go over those numbers, we had 5 new students added to the list. Those 5 students we're generating a bill for those additional 5 students now. So we're probably over north of 30 in terms of students from 24, 25. And I think we have a list of 10 or 15 that are this year. So we continue to kind of push that process. Our billing, I think, is going to lag just because of what it is. But my goal is to be sending out invoices on a quarterly basis and push that number. We're including in the current year budget, right, almost $500,000 for those students. Pardon me?
We're including that without getting the funding first?
Yes, I mean, we do, in terms of not getting the money first, yes. I mean, we are anticipating billing that much. My expectation is we'll continue to do that, right? I think it's a variable for sure. We'll continue to push to get it, and we'll continue to push to make sure that we're hitting that goal.
Is that amount 2024, 25, 25, 26? Or is that your anticipated amount of refund for the 25, 26 school year?
Well, the 25, 26, this current school year, right, we'll see a lion's share of that because that's what really pushed, took the level up a notch.
Okay.
Right, and really trying to solicit those funds. And we'll continue to see how it plays out over the next couple of months, but I think that will continue in our process to make sure that we're hitting those numbers. Just a couple of general financial updates before we get into the budget piece. We have a refinancing that should be happening towards the end of this month, the beginning of March. It's a relatively small refinancing opportunity. The market's a little bit scattered at the moment, so we'll see how that plays out. We are wrapping up, thanks to Vera and her work with our auditors, wrapping up the 24-25 audit, and I expect a draft this week or early next. And my intentions would be, as we have in the past, to have the auditors here and present the audit to the Finance Committee at our March meeting, and that they will come back again and present that to the board at large at the Committee of the Whole meeting. I've always provided time in that meeting that management steps out and you guys can pepper the auditors with other questions. But I think that's a good step and a good thing to be doing. So we're intent on doing that, and I think that'll wrap it up by March. We were talking to the team, I guess 2 weeks ago, and Vera and our push is we want them in sooner, and that's what we need to do. I think we have a good team today. I think it was a new group that sort of picked up the audit in the middle to the middle of 2025. And got it done. Whenever you change auditors, it takes a little bit of education on both sides, right? So that we're both get back to a common language. But I think it is so far so good this year. All right. Any questions on the financial update? No? All right. And we will jump into our budget. Sort of just the opportunity to reiterate our goal, right, is to ensure that fiscal responsibility through a comprehensive examination of district expenditures, aligning financial resources with strategic priorities that advance high-quality student outcomes with a focus on efficiency. That is the message that came out of our early December meeting. I'm going to kind of continue to play back to that. We had talked about a series of focus points, and I think we are working on each one of those to varying degrees, right? The budget cycle, I wish it was shorter and a little less painful, right? But it is a process, right? It will take us certainly 4 or 5 months to get everything in line, because there's a lot of things we just don't know at this time relative to enrollment, relative to student needs that we go through. So that process is time consuming, and will work hopefully to our betterment. As you all took place, yes.
I just have one question about the BCIU. I know we talked about the Davis and the 17 kids. There was a second one, I thought, that was also out there
I'm sorry?
in terms of the transfer of the entity.
Yes.
The two autistic support classrooms that we were
Correct.
talking about.
Correct, yep, no, so the transfer of entity is still very much in play. In Dr. Hopkins' discussions in the end of January, she talked about transfer of entity. So I think that is certainly something that is going to play a part in the IU contract, because currently those kids we are paying through our contract. We'd switch that, they would leave purchase services, their salaries would move into ours, but we anticipate significant, an opportunity for some significant savings, in the $500,000 range. Was that answer your question? Perfect.
When would that take place?
When would the transfer of entity take place? The transfer of entity would happen sort of going into the end of the school year. So we have to offer the opportunity to the teachers who are teaching those classes to come on board with Centennial. So there's some negotiation there, right? We'd have to have it in advance of the IU contract that is due sort of at the end of May. So it's a April, May, pin that thing down kind of event. To understand, okay, this is the staffing we need to pick up because they are providing additional services as part of their fee, and then that would impact us as well as impact the contract with the IU.
Thank you.
Because today we pay per student, right? So we pay anywhere from $76,000, $75,000 to $110,000 per student in those classrooms, right? So we have 8 kids. We have 2 classrooms with 8 in each. It's 16 kids. That's the number we're looking at, right? And if we have those kids in there, that's where we're going to hopefully, not hopefully, but that's where we would recover some money.
And that's an annual, an annual savings each year it's going to be, because otherwise we would.
Absolutely, right? I mean, special education costs, as long as I've been here, right, they have continued to escalate, right? So not only have the number of students increased, but the cost for the services have increased, right? So it's a 1-2 punch, if you will, right? That we are really, you have both of those things going on. Those costs are going up, 10%, 15% year after year. To provide those services, and it's not just the IU, but it's at any one of these outplacements, right? That cost escalation, as we look at it, is certainly impacting us.
Keeping in mind, too, that it's based upon the number of students. So if we get an increase, obviously the number might go up, decrease. And then there's also going to be fluctuations, pardon me, based upon the number of teachers and staff we have to have per student. So kind of like we do in the elementary schools, when you hit that tipping point, you add an aide or add another, full-time FTE to the group. So there's a fluctuation up and down in that. But, as our special ed numbers continue to go up.
Supplied by BCIU as well, or like the
At-
teachers are we?
At this
supplying-
current time, yes. That whole classroom is all inclusive of the IU, correct?
It's,
Yeah.
as I think Dr. Lukaba refers to it as a classroom sort of within a classroom, I think is his wording. It is an IU classroom, 2 IU classrooms that operate independently of the greater Davis Elementary School, right? So they would become incorporated into Davis, right? They would do all of the Davis Dolphin kind of things. And they would be taught by, extend. They would be taught by district students.
We're going to be here a while. Now, okay, extend.
Thank you. Is that answer? Good. Okay. The preliminary budget has been posted, as we mentioned earlier this week, on our website. The special meeting has been advertised for Tuesday, the 17th, to approve that preliminary budget. And as we mentioned during that meeting, right, the preliminary budget is just that. It's not the final budget. It's just a pathway to the final budget.
So which one on here are you presenting? Are you presenting with the 3.5%?
The 3.5% budget is what is listed as the preliminary budget, right? So the preliminary budget shows revenue of $154 million, expenses of $161 million, and a $7 million deficit. Okay. And then just a look at some of the steps that we have gone through. Some of these we've talked about. Dr. Hopkins meeting with the IU, the opportunity to do a transfer of entity, whether it's just those 2 classes at Davis or if we look beyond that. Student course selection is wrapping up, and we'll begin working with school administrators to review scheduling and if there's opportunities to create some efficiency there. We have we're completing a vendor review. Mrs. Krieger was instrumental in sort of breaking down our numbers by vendors, provided some great information and insight. Let me see if this works. I'm sorry, unable to open the file. Hate when that happens. I can pull it up at a later time. But what Mrs. Krieger was able to do was to identify by vendor the top vendors that we have and we're utilizing, and with that, begin to look and say, hey, if we're using this vendor across the organization, hey, are there ways to consolidate that billing? And I think those were very critical, right? The one short list that she showed totaled $22.3 million in our top 26 vendors with contracts over $100,000. That 22 is 85% of our total other expenditures. But when we break them down, right, between student services is 32% by themselves of those contracts, right? So 32% of those are with the IU. Another 36% of that expense is debt service. So debt service combined represent 68% of our shortlisted vendor list, and they represent combined 60% of all other costs, right? So IU or special student services, tuitions, etc., IU are all in there, and debt service really eat up a lot of the numbers. So when we look at it, that's where our challenge is, to continue to try to find ways to reduce costs. Charter tuitions, which are sort of out of our hand, they represent $1 million, which is 5% of that total list that was looked at. The Middle Bucks Institute of Technology, right, that's $1.5 million on that list. That's another 7%. So I think there's these things that are a part of our educational plan that we need to continue to be evaluating.
Have we gotten a first look yet at MBIT's budget?
We have our first look. We were on the phone earlier this week. MBIT's budget is between a 4.6% increase and a 5.8% increase. Should they be allowed to, they have 2 options. One is adding a teacher to the program, and that's where their budget is at the moment. So I think they are continuing to review it and to trying to make those tweaks. The MBIT, it's a challenging one, right? And we really need to focus on open and clear communication with them, right? Because things like facilities upkeep, right? The sending districts all sent a decent amount of money their way. That ran out with the end of this year, so we're not today hooked on that. But again, I think they will have ongoing facilities needs that the sending districts will need to find a way to fund. The meeting on the 17th for the preliminary budget, as noted on, we're seeking approval to request a referendum exception from PDE. We're looking to do that as part of this meeting to move that forward, should you desire. We did share the retirement incentive that was approved at the January 27th meeting. A note went out from HR to the professional staff, sharing that information. I don't think we've had an upswell of people making that move. And again, I think with Tara joining us, I think that's something that we should be looking at sort of long-term, trying to figure out on what that number is and how we can move those that area
Is there a
forward.
target per year?
Pardon
So like
me?
you had originally said that 48% of the teachers are in that lower, right,
Yep.
in the quadrant where they've hit all their step increases. Is there a target so that you don't all of a sudden lose 48% of your teachers in terms of how many you're going to try and attempt to do each year?
Right, we have over half our teachers in the bottom box, right? Over half of the teachers, which is great, right? It's great to have a tenured teaching staff, right? It creates some nervousness, I would think, in the teaching administration, right? That eventually, they're all there together, right? They could retire together, right? The ladder is only a 15-step ladder, so in 15 years, you could all be at the bottom. And there's a wide spread, right? There's years between individuals at 50 and 55 who have been teaching for 15 years. That could be a no-brainer, right? If you got out of college and you're 21 or 22, 20 years get you to 52, 42, right? And you're like, okay, it's still a lot of time, right? It's still a lot of time on the clock. So it takes some further breaking down. I reviewed the numbers with Dr. Lukaba back in January, really just not using the step, but using ages and dates to try to segment the group as to when we could begin to see them retiring. We have a number of teachers that are over 65 that are still working and still enjoying teaching and still in the game. So I think it's a complicated process. It's a personal decision in many regards, but that's a target. So I think to your point, and I think Dr. Lukaba mentioned it as well, we'd rather have a slow drip, right, than lose 40 teachers 1 year, 50 teachers at 1 year. Dr. Bolton believes the district in his time here could hire 40 in a summertime window, right? If you had 40 retirements, he thinks you could manage that. But that's a challenge.
Do we understand the negative impact of PESers when you have all of these people all these teachers who would retire and you'd be bringing in younger staff who would be contributing less, but you still have to cover the retirement costs for the people teachers who've retired?
We don't pay. I think we've talked about this. We don't pay for teachers who retire, right? The PESers plan pays for them. So we pay in, employees and employers pay into the fund, right? When you retire, you leave the district, and your pension is funded not by the school any longer, but out of the PESers plan.
Keeping in mind that new teachers coming in are part of a hybrid plan now, where it's not a straight PESers, there's a 401k hybrid that goes with it. And then also keeping in mind that once they've retired, that the statewide increases, we pay for the retirees in Beaver County, just like the retirees in Beaver County pay for the ones in Bucks County. So that kind of averages out in there. And then you have your actuarials of, people that pass away and move out of the system, all of that. You also have the ones that may have worked as a school teacher for 10 years, moved on to a second vocation, who are now retiring from that, and they are now collecting their portion of the PSERS, which would be obviously significantly lower than a 30-year teacher would be. But as far as like targets for teachers retiring, we really have no control over that. That's not something that's, you know, we're not trying to force anybody out. We're just making it financially advantageous if they'd like to move through.
And the split is on the employee side, right? So new employees have that split plan, a defined benefit plan, a defined pension plan, if you will, and then a 403B style plan. The employer side continues to pay the same amount, right? The employer pays 34% salaries on all employee payroll, right? And all employees need to be participating members in the pension.
And then that number changes every year. There's a chart of the anticipated, just like you have the Act 1 index, there's an anticipated chart as to how much that goes up and down. It actually trailed down for 3 or 4 years, but has gone back up. It is, and then we get a 50% reimbursement from the state as long as the state continues to fund that. Should the state stop funding that, there'd probably be anarchy in the state.
Be a bad day.
Yeah, it would be a bad day.
Okay, so that's sort of the update. Again, I'm trying to pick out the highlights that, you know, I think the budget is going on every day in everyone's mind, you know, whether it's Dr. Zachin and his team, whether it's Dr. Hopkins within special education, whether it's Kristen in technology, right? We are looking at it every day. Just the calendar that we looked at, you know, hoping that the deadline to have an adoption of a preliminary budget is next Wednesday, the 18th, hence our meeting on the 17th. It has been posted since the beginning of February, and then we need to submit it, so there's the work to get it uploaded into the PSERS system. Other dates, deadline to publish notice if we intend to request approval for a referendum exception, and how those dates work. And then really the adoption, April's sort of a quiet month relative to interaction with PDE on the budget, and then we really end up May and into June, where we have the June 30th deadline to implement and to pass a final budget.
Did we have any community outreach of the budget that was posted, the preliminary one? Anybody reach out and say, what are you doing?
I have
Is it
not.
quiet?
I have not heard. Right. We advertise. We have it posted, but in all honesty, I'm not sure we have the online. They could be looking at it, right? In my first couple of years, I had it printed. I had like a little book set at the counter, ready for use. People could come in and look at it, but I don't think I got a one. But it is available online. We try to
No
present it.
emails to you, what are you doing?
Not yet.
See, that's
Those,
Can we get a hit count?
Let's take that as positive.
Can we get a hit count? Yeah, see if we can get a hit count on the page.
right,
Yeah.
those calls come in July.
Yeah. Or August when the tax bills go out.
Right. Okay. Any questions with regard to the presentation portion of our meeting? Okay. Looking at items to be presented as information, we have the PST-LAF monthly reports, sort of standard reports that look at the district, interest, bond rates, and the like. And I guess, in the formality, and we forgot this last time, which was my mistake, I didn't get approval to carry the prior two items forward. So if we can have approval to present this informational item.
So moved.
Okay. A second.
Second.
All right.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays or any abstentions?
Opposed or contrary?
Mrs. Krieger, I'm gonna buy you a microphone that goes,
A lavalier. We'll get you a lavalier.
I'm gonna get you a lapel mic, or I'll stand there with this and get you know, wear like a dark hood or something. I can just hold it over. Okay. There's 3 items that we are looking to present to the committee of the whole meeting. The first one, we have Kristen here. She suffered through a finance committee meeting to be able to share her thoughts on number 1. So why don't you?
Yeah, Mr. Hartline did a great job teeing me up, I feel like, trying to explain co-stars out. So we are, unfortunately, the last two budget cycles, fortunately or unfortunately, you know, we try to be responsible, and you get a cheaper rate by buying a 3 or a 5-year deal. So the last 2 budget cycles, we've posted nice happy zeros for these 2 products, which is great. But guess what? It's 3-year renewal time for our firewall and our cybersecurity technologies. So we do, where possible, try to use CoStars, which is the state group that allows us to get a kind of reduced cost, a consortium pricing from the state is what CoStars is. That is available for Palo Alto. Unfortunately, it's not available for Arctic Wolf. But one of the reasons we're bringing this to you so early, I know, you know, we're not going to renew this until July, but we're seeing this across the tech industry. Prices are just going to start exponentially increasing in March. So we are doing what we can to get ahead of the curve. Our vendors are willing to lock in our current rates if we commit before March 1st. You can see 10 to 15% increase after that. So anything that we can kind of lock in, we're trying to bring forward now. These 2 products are our 2 main cybersecurity products for the district. So whether it's a firewall stopping an initial attack or it allows for network monitoring, we do try to triangulate with cybersecurity. So the idea would be that if Palo Alto was compromised and we had everything in Palo Alto, guess what? You're compromised. That's why we do bring together multiple vendors. It's not represented here, but one of the places we have been able to realize a little bit of savings with cybersecurity is on the very back end. So by wrapping Palo Alto around a little bit, we can get rid of a 3rd vendor we had on top of this to do a little bit of back end work. It doesn't save us a ton, but it does save us a little bit, and we are slowly trying to look for savings everywhere we can.
Is this both hardware and software, or is this?
This is different for us.
strictly
This is all software.
All software.
We have not traditionally brought this before to committees.
Right.
The number was so large, and our budget being what it was, I wanted to bring it to you all to have the chance to explain, so that when the whole board sees a large number, you can speak to it with understanding of why our software prices are quite so large this year.
Are we looking at any increase in, or any new hardware in the coming couple of years?
Sure. So the big project for this year that's been going through operations is our switch project. Again, we do try to very thoughtfully divide projects up. So switches this year, VX Rail, and then APs. So we kind of do that over a 3-year cycle as well. The other big hardware project that we'll be working on is a computer lab refresh at the high school and support staff devices. So just like we try to divide up teachers, students, whether or not that works or doesn't work, that's kind of how we divide up as well as support staff as the final group that needs to be refreshed. It's been 4 years for their devices.
Are there any maintenance agreements with either of these vendors in terms of the hardware?
So these are both software agreements.
No, I
Right.
understand that, but is there other expenses with Palo Alto and Arctic Wolf?
You won't see other expenses with them. We will be bringing kind of hardware expenses to you for our VX Rail and for our switches going forward, and those do have maintenance. We had the rubric on last week's budget that went through. That was a big maintenance piece that we do as well. So they're just a little bit, they come through in different channels as well.
All right. On the switch side, right, that's an expense coming out of our capital budget, right? So that's, will come out of the capital.
As opposed to the general fund, thank you.
Yeah, the general fund, but.
And I do have the answer to how many hits we have on the budget on the website. It is 29 visits. 29. I know that me has been a dozen at least. I click into it every day and review. So I can't, I mean, we haven't filtered between internal versus external visits, but 29.
So I'll figure 8 school directors, 9 school directors, and.
I thought I was all 29.
And how many Mr. Greenwood has done.
I thought I was all 29. Is it still there? Is it there? How about now? All right. The second item, seeking to carry forward to the full board is approval of the Bucks County Intermediates 2026-2027 Programs and Services budget in the amount of $2,158,802. The district's allocation of that, as Rachel shared, is $72,860, an increase of $937, or just over 1% last year. Actually, I should probably, let's take them one at a time. Let's, the technology one, right? Can we have a,
So moved.
bring that forward?
I motioned aye.
All right. The second one, the IU Programs and Services budget.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
All right. 2 for 2. The last one is seeking a referendum exception. As part of the preliminary budget experience, one can seek an exception from the Department of Education for a handful, namely 4 different categories of expenses. The one that we would look at is a special education exemption, and that exception allows you to go above the Act 1 index for that next budget year. Attached to the document, sort of advertisement language that we would need to do. We would need to post that, as we do all things, on the newspaper. If 29 people are looking at it online, I'm not sure there's a single person who finds it on the newspaper. But
I was gonna say
continue
probably less than that
to
in
be
the newspaper.
required to post these announcements in the newspaper.
I thought there was a law that changed that we didn't have to necessarily do newspapers but I forget what it was. It's
Continue to
weird.
put 'em in- You know, and I say that, but I'm old. I get the newspaper delivered to my house. I walk down the driveway every single morning. I pick up the newspaper. I read it halfway up the driveway. I eat my Cheerios and read the paper. And I come to work.
You need to-
That's my process.
You need a dog trained to go fetch your paper.
Yeah. I had a dog. She couldn't fetch many things, but she was a great friend.
Yep.
So this is a draft of what that special exemption would look like. What it does is it compares one year to another year, and it looks at the cost escalation of that. And it would calculate, you could have an additional 3.47% roughly added to the Act 1 on top of that. So you don't, again, it doesn't mandate a number. It just allows the district, should the district want to consider that option, to go above the Act 1. And that's sort of where we were at our meeting in January when we opted out of the quick resolution, the early adoption. So any thoughts relative to this?
So that I understand, are you putting in numbers, or are you, I would love to understand how you're presenting it to them, that you're asking for the exception. Are you putting in actual numbers in the system and saying, this is what we're presenting?
Yep, so what this worksheet looks at is the 2024 AFR, which is our annual financial report, compared to the FY25 annual financial report, right, on special education related expenses. So the function codes are those 1,200 codes, right? So it walks you down through that process. This is just a draft. It's just a spreadsheet that you can use as a tool, right? The real submission, should we choose to submit, is done online. It's done in the PDE system. We would enter this same information, or it would pop up because they would know it, because that's where it gets done. And it then compares those costs sort of year to year, right? So $36 million in special education costs in 24, $41 million in 25. So it takes those things into account, and it calculates what that difference is, and the schools index and the potential change that could be approved, right? It doesn't mean it's going to be approved. It just is an option should we choose to do that.
So I think I'm still missing something there, 24 and 25. We're talking about the year.
Right, the world lags, right? So, and I don't mean that sarcastically, right? So what they are looking at are the AFR is the sort of the Bible, if you will, to some extent, in terms of school expenses. Every school in Pennsylvania uses the same chart of accounts. Every school in Pennsylvania submits the same annual financial report due by the end of December at its latest. So we all go through that process to make sure those updates are done. And then we utilize, the PDE utilizes that data to measure changes in that special education costs, right, which get totaled down here at the bottom.
It's extrapolating out for the 2026 school year, an expectation of the same type of increase year over year.
That's what I would
And you
do.
can see, as we've talked about, right, it also looks at revenue, right? So special education revenue was 3.4 million, it went to 3.8 million, right? While expenses went from 36 to 41 million, right? So the ability to keep, IDEA, that number hasn't changed in
In 15 years that I've been
right?
here. Yeah.
So the growth in special education costs isn't keeping step with the revenue from the federal side or from the state side. And that leaves sort of the burden. So,
Yeah, our special ed costs went up 10 times what our state funding did. And if you look around just the Bucks County area, if you look at Central Bucks, Council Rock, Neshaminy, Bensalem, Penn Ridge, Pennsbury, they're all in the same boat. Some of them are looking at 8, 9%, as opposed to 3.5% total, Act One. They're looking in the 8 and 9% increases.
yeah, I think that some of the school districts have a different number, right? So
Yes.
Neshaminy has a different makeup than Warminster. Their Act One is, I think, 4%, 4.1%.
Yeah, they've got a little
I
different.
think Ben Salem's also in that boat. I think they have a higher Act One number. Other than that, I think they're, I'm not sure of all of the schools. I'm aware of 2 other school districts that went the preliminary budget way instead of the opt-out. Everyone else went the opt-out route.
Does this ever boil over where everybody says, hey, listen, this is just not sustainable?
Not in 100 and, well, let's see, public schools started in 1859 in Pennsylvania.
I mean, it is a fundamental challenge.
I mean, you do occasionally get, so a few years ago, there was the sale of the liquor control and then putting that money into Peasers and Sears, I mean, the state pension as well. Never really went anywhere. You do get occasional stuff that does come through. You had Act 76, which wanted to take all tax revenue, put it to the state, and then the state would give it back to us. That did not pass on a tiebreaker by the president of the House at the time, Michael, I forget his last name, began with an S, Steele, I think. So there are some things that do come through, but the model is not sustainable. But you have to keep in mind that there are school districts on the western part of the state that are on the receiving end. Because of hold harmless, they have dwindling student populations, dwindling personnel, but they are still receiving the same amount of money from the state. So where we're in a giving position, they are in a receiving position. So they are not going to want to upset the apple cart to help us.
And so I think I included that in one of the weekly updates, right? 150 schools don't receive any additional funding, right? So the lawsuit that came through the state and to the state Supreme Court, I think, maybe not the Supreme Court, but the state ruling that said we needed to balance the funding, right? That those areas don't have the same tax base, don't have the same assessment value, or weren't able to fund their school districts, right? So there is $500 million going towards that, right? But to the 150 schools who, out of the 500 that don't qualify for that funding, we're left with, relatively flat funding coming out of the state.
And most of them are in this area.
So it's been a misnomer all these years that they always said lottery funded education. Clearly not the case.
No, gambling does afford us some money, right?
I say, because we do get the homestead.
We do, through the homestead, farmstead agreements, right? The district will pick up, $3.3 million that the state will fund, and that'll reduce property taxes. So that aspect does, it just doesn't eliminate it, right? And that number has actually grown due to the increase in gambling, right?
Right,
It's
I'd say because
all
you got sports
gambling,
betting and, yeah.
that goes to it. And sports betting is
And-
blown off the charts.
And that money also goes towards emergency services, fire department, rescue squads. There's some police funding in there. So there is some other side of the road funding that does come out of that as well. Ben Salem does really well. I mean, Ben Salem having Parks Casino, they get a little higher cut than some of the other areas do. So having it in your backyard pays, but you also put up with it in your backyard. All right, motion to move all three of these forward.
Second.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. Brings us to the close at number 9, and I'll pass it back to you, Mrs. Krieger.
Anybody is here to?
I don't know if Dr. Zach.
Have we gone
counts
to
or say-
30 on the count yet?
When are we gonna, start talking about ways to reduce our deficit? When do we get into that? When do we have the board together and?
Mrs. Krieger asked the exact same question. Yep. No, she asked the exact same question before you came in, and as I shared with her, and as you well know, part of it is a process. There's a series of things that need to happen, such as things around scheduling, right? So student scheduling, we need to have course selection before that happens, and that has always sort of been a push and pull. And what in every meeting so far this year, we started talking with the high school back in December. We met with the middle schools in January. We need to do that sooner, right? We need to do that. That process needs to move closer to the beginning of the school year, and it can't be allowed to sort of fall towards the end, because it really hinders our ability to assess and make efficiency plans around that. So to answer your question, I think that will happen sort of towards the middle of February, and I think then we will begin, as we have, to walk through these. We're continuing to work to shore up the transfer of entity. We're continuing to try to follow up on our special education costs and those students involved, right? So there isn't a window that it will all go away, but I'll tell you, under Dr. Lukabaugh's charge, right, we are really pushing, much harder and looking at things much more closely than we have. Not that we weren't doing them in the past. I think we had done a lot of work around that other group of expenses, right? Continuing to try to whittle down department budgets. But, as I've shared, department budgets make up a very small portion of the overall expenses, right? Labor's the key.
Districting?
What's that?
Even like the redistricting, something
The idea
to
of
make sure we have the same
redistricting?
amount of students and.
Yep. I mean, I think the idea of redistricting is one that we can certainly dig into, right? That's a long-term plan. And I think it's something we could certainly begin to look at. And perhaps perhaps there, again, sort of on my own here, but that's something that maybe we put a group, sort of a board subcommittee on, that looks at redistricting, because it's complicated and it's sensitive as an issue, right? But we could begin to look at that.
The,
Do more research on that?
so we, yeah, and that's, I mean, I guess a month ago, we had brought this up at a regular school board meeting, and we had talked about looking at to see how those numbers, if they're coming to fruition, on the study that we had done. Redistricting, having been through it before, the cost savings is not substantial because it's more of a balancing. So you have 7 classrooms at this school, 5 at this school, now you have 6 at both, but you still have the same personnel. Okay,
Instead of hiring more teachers, you could just move them to where the student need is.
you don't always have that. In other words, so if, and we'll pick on Davis and McDonald, if the average class size at Davis is 22 and the average class size at McDonald is 25, the movement of 9 children is not going to to drop out a teacher necessarily or allow a teacher to be reassigned. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of math that goes into it, but there's a lot of balancing that goes on. But we need to look at, I think we did a Hay Group study, and we need to see how the Bucks County numbers and that are coming into what our enrollment is. And I believe Dr. Luca Ball, when we asked him about it, he said that they were waiting to see what their kindergarten and elementary school registration is, that they have started early on that this year already, so they've already started to push for it. And then we're gonna wait to see what those numbers are. It's, I mean, I wanna say the last time we did it, it took 2 years, realistically. And there was a significant misbalance. So we did have 1 or 2 schools where the average class size was significantly lower, but it was also done in, with the closing of the schools.
Right, was that coincided?
Coincided with
Schools, right?
with the closing
The
of the
elementary
schools.
schools that we
Right.
eliminated, right? You're almost forced to
do
talk
the-
about it, right?
Yes.
So it is a
Even though it
forced
was one
discussion.
school in each district or in each region, there still needed to be a
Right, because they're
rebalancing.
all a little bit different, right?
Yes.
So I think that's what spurred that.
Yeah.
We can certainly look at that. I will take a to-do from this and do some comparisons on where we had that study completed 2 years ago, I think it was presented. And I think we can look at that and say, okay, hey, that was projecting another, a lot of early enrollment at the kindergarten ages. I know we are seeing enrollment in the kindergarten ages. I'll tell you, Thomas is doing a bang-up super job in really making sure that's happening a whole lot sooner. A couple of years ago, we were enrolling kids in September. That was not a good thing. Last year, we were really on top of that. I think the numbers didn't change much from the middle of May to where we got to the opening day.
I see, that's why I'd said, with Southampton Days is the perfect spot to put up a "Have you enrolled your child yet?" booth and say, because everybody from the community is there.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, so, yeah, I mean, I think we did do, I want to say this time last year, we had also did a breakdown of average class sizes in the elementary school across the board. So we may want to revisit that as well to see where we're at year over year.
Yep, we can certainly look at that as well.
Not to make too much work for you guys, I'm sorry.
No, I think we can certainly compare it back to the study that was done. I can push the study out. It's in a binder, sits on my credenza. I can pull it out. I can, that's easy to do. I can share that.
I think there's a PDF already out there. You may just have to copy it over.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
Motion to adjourn? All right.
Next meeting is Thursday, March 12th.
Thank you very much.